Hello and welcome to the Indo GAA pod, and he's back from his 1 week hiatus. I don't know what he was doing last week, but he's back with us anyway. Delighted to have Pat Spillane and Dick Clerkin with us this week, boys. How we doing?
We're all good.
Very well.
All good, Mike. How you doing? Good to see you back, Pat.
Is that the case? Sorry, is this podcast now sort of following the new game of Gaelic football? Because I do note in the new game of Gaelic football where kickouts are the king, and we're looking for big, strong, athletic guys. I was dropped last week in place of a fucking 6'5"
6'7".
6'7" guy from me.
6'7".
6'7". Dick, how do you know what that is? Oh, JD Mac.
Can he score? Anyway, I was hurt to be dropped one of the few times in my life. Dwyer dropped me one time. I swear to God, the only time I was dropped was 77 for the first National League game. And we'd been beaten in the All Ireland semi-final. And then obviously the first league game is in October, 2 months later, whatever that is. And anyway, I was listed as a sub, and Dwyer rang me, and this is Dwyer. Dwyer rang me, Pat, really sorry about this. He said, geez, I don't know what they're after doing. I wasn't at the meeting. Jesus Christ, Mick. And you knew goddamn well, Mick was at the meeting. Mick had dropped me, but yeah. Jesus, no, he hung out the other four selectors to dry. If I was there, Pat, you'd be starting. Anyway.
Well, it's the first selection meeting that ever happened without the manager. So I've never heard of that. And let's get one thing straight, Pat. You were not dropped. You did not make yourself available for selection last week. There's a different thing.
Available on unavailable on one day, available the following day.
Well, Dick, it's like this.
Colin was impressive. Now he pulled out a stat from the 1955 All Ireland. You have a high bar to meet.
You have a lot to live up to.
Look, lads, the bottom line, to have respect. From the GA community, you need those All Ireland medals. So I presume Dick has them hanging there.
Hold on, we're going to start.
Them hanging behind him there on the wall.
We're going to start the equivalent of a swear jar for Pat. Every time he mentions how many All Ireland medals he has, All Stars, or finals he's played in, he has to donate a favour to charity. Right? You're already on a favour.
Did I mention anything about number of All Ireland medals?
Not yet. We're only into it now. We're only we've still got 40 minutes to go.
When I come back in the next world, there are two jobs that I've always said I want to be. One as a consultant, so maybe a consultant to consultants, because it's one of those vague titles that no one knows who they are. Yeah. And if I can't become a consultant, I'm going to become an influencer, because I have figured it out. This is the way to go. It's all about influencers. You require no skill, no qualifications, no nothing at all, just a lot of neck, and you can make a lot of moolah. So a consultant or an influencer, or maybe I could be a consultant influencer. No, that's what.
It's a bit like
money in punditry anyway. Yeah. So you need something else.
It's a bit like playing cornerback. No skill required or no qualifications. Boys,
isn't that what John B. Keane, the Lord of Mercy soul, who was a great friend of mine, like John B. Keane once said, the most dangerous animal on planet Earth, he said. What is the most dangerous animal on planet Earth? And John B. said the most dangerous animal on planet Earth is a junior B cornerback of 45 years of age with varicose veins. He said, that's the most dangerous animal on planet Earth. Anyway.
Just to finish that tangent, I'm a big believer that anyone before they play like senior football or anything like that should have to be exposed to junior football, because you learn how to protect yourself. You learn all the tricks of the trade when you go down that level, because it is a different animal completely. But lads, we're gone off to all sorts of tangents there, but it was another...
Before we lose the last few listeners that are still
it was another right good weekend of action. We'll start with Armagh Galway, lads, from Saturday evening. Plenty of drama here. Dick, I'll start with you. Galway came away with the win. Goals were the difference in the wind up, but geez, where do you start here?
I was just sitting watching it with the boys, like for the last week in January, I know we could keep saying it, but it's every week it turns up the physicality, the intensity, the intent, the tackling. Like Jesus, it was not for the faint-hearted, that game. Some of the balls going out in the middle of the field, at the size of the players, the quality of fielding and the score. So here, I think both teams are coming out away with a lot to be happy about. Obviously, Kieran McGeeney was very peeved and frustrated with the...
We'll get to that, yeah.
We'll get to that. But at the same time, he's looking at a team going toe-to-toe They were the better team. They should have won it, through a few freakish goals. Again, huge performance from Andrew Moran around the middle of the field. It's good an exhibition of fielding with the new rules that we've probably seen. Like, it must have been about half a dozen balls he got up against. Like, there's not too many opposing players that sort of dominate early against Galway over the last couple of years, and he was fantastic. But on the flip side of that, like Pádraig Joyce, and we said it last week, despite losing against Mayo, Pádraig Joyce would have seen enough green shoots in that Galway performance, especially with the younger players coming through. He says, yeah, right, we've a bit to go, but there's something here. So they go up to Armagh. I tell you what, I never, as a player, come out of Armagh too often with a result, especially when you're playing an Armagh team that's on their game. And like, yes, they were fortunate. On another day, they would have been beaten, but I'd say he was going down the road in that Galway. You could see it. You could see those boys were bouncing. Like, it sort of was more than just a National League win for them. They sort of knew that, right, we need a performance here. We need something to sort of bounce back, because they were probably a bit deflated, not just after losing to Mayo, but the last sort of 12 months and where they're at. Yeah, but in terms of the quality of football, the intensity, the physicality, I said, like, teams are just stretching ahead, and Galway and Armagh are two of the teams up there now that have what it takes. It was a cracking game.
Yeah, McGeeney was very animated after. Pat, I'll put this to you. He criticised the decision to award Galway a free for a 3v3 breach in the first half. Rob Finnerty kind of got a freak goal from that. He claimed that Joe McElroy had been unfairly disciplined when he was trying to bring attention to the sideline to a personal injury. So just his quotes were shocking, absolutely shocking stuff, fellas. It's the level we are going to be, if this is the level that we're going to be adhered to, and he kind of breaks off then and says, Joe, you can see it is plain as day. He stops and he walks towards me because he's hurt. For the fourth official to call that a breach, I don't even know if he crossed the halfway line, but he is within the 5 metre line. Shocking stuff, absolutely shocking. I know I'm not allowed to use the words I would like to use, but you've seen it, it's shocking stuff, absolutely shocking. When a fella is coming over to say he needs to come off and there's a 5 metre buffer zone, there is a rule that states very effing clearly that you are not interfering with the play. It is a free kick from the halfway line. So even if he is wrong and takes it, absolutely shocking stuff, massive turning point. Pat, can you see McGeeney's frustration?
No, isn't it gas in a way, like the two coolest men on the sideline in Gaelic football, Jim McGuinness and Kieran McGeeney, and they have a sort of zen-like appearance where they seem to pick a spot 100 yards in the distance and they stare at that, and they're so charismatic, they're so knowledgeable, and they never let their guard down. And geez, after the first week, when they had beaten Dublin, Jim left his guard down. And last week, Kieran left his guard down, in particular to Joe McElroy breach, and in relation to a question being asked about fisted pints. Now, and I know what's happening. A lot of these modern coaches and gurus are getting a bit cranky and upset now. And I have a theory why. And do you remember the US Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, and his famous quote about unknown unknowns? There are things we don't know. And this is what's happening with the modern game of Gaelic football. There are things we don't know. The game is no longer controllable. It's chaotic. It's off the cuff. It's unscripted. And the coaches who had complete control over how the players operated under the old rules are now losing a bit of control. And obviously, McGeeney would have been very disappointed because, yes, they lost the game. They should have won. But it had nothing to do with the Joe McElroy breach that they lost the game. I would sort of probably point out to the fact that question about fisted pints. I remember last year when Armagh played Antrim, and Antrim gave them a good game in the championship in the first half, and in the second half, Armagh took over and they dominated. But what was interesting about that game, and I said it on this podcast, was the amount of times Armagh players broke through and just fisted the ball over the bar. And they fisted something like 7 fisted pints last week. And I looked at them, and you're sort of saying, there was at least 3 occasions there was a pop pass on and a fella should have got a goal. And McGeeney was asked that after, and he said, players have choice. They have choice whether to go for a pint. They have choice whether to go for a goal. They have choice if they want to fist the ball over the bar. And yes, I can accept that. But having choice, that's fine. But that means you have faith in the players to make the right choice. And I just feel that the decision making by the Armagh players, when they're fisting the ball over the bar, is incorrect. I think they should be popping it off to a player. You look back at the Dubs. The Dubs were brilliant. If the Dubs had a 2-on-1 or 3-on-2, the Dubs are going for the juggler. They were popping the pass off to a fair and better position and going for goal. If David Clifford was 1-on-1, say the last attack, which was a vital attack, when Jason Duffy got through. Simple pass, he punched it over the bar. But Keane McConville was standing unopposed. All it needed was a pop pass. McConville would score the goal, and Armagh would have won the game. But like at the end of the day, like, stats are funny. They're the highest scoring team in the entire 4 national leagues after 2 matches, Armagh. But their shooting stats last week was 18 out of 31, which was disappointing. And Dick mentioned Andrew Murnan, whose fielding was absolutely superb. But I think on at least 3, if not 4 occasions, he kicked the ball into the goalie's hand. So that's why McGeeney was nothing to do with the Joe McElroy breach or anything like that. He was just cranky because they're losing control of the game. This newfangled game, coaches are still getting the hang of it. It needs a bit of thinking outside the box. It needs a bit of innovation. And like in the old days, look, Christ almighty, I never managed an inter-county team. I could have managed an inter-county team in the old days because it was painted by numbers approach. When you lost possession, the boys went back, parked the bus, the other lads ambled along. It was easy. This requires a lot of imagination, a lot of time. And the coaches, all the best of brains, have still not figured it out. Will McGeeney and McGuinness figure it out? Of course they will, because they're very sharp. They're astute boys. They're great thinkers in the game, and they will find a way out. But at the moment, they haven't found a way around the modern game. Yes, Jim got cranky, and I know the likes of me would be one of them, because he got cranky about people criticising the tactics for the All-Ireland final. And what was the criticism? The criticism was his deep zonal marking. And guess what's happening? Last week again, we saw for the second week in a row, Donegal were pushing out and they're man marking. So Jimmy mightn't listen to critics, but believe it or not, he does listen to critics. He's not that stupid. Anyway.
Just a quick one, Dick, I'll put it to you. I asked McGeeney last year after the Derry game about the hand pass points, and he kind of gave me...
Did you live to fight?
No, I did. I did. He gave me a different answer. His answer was more along the lines of, If it's a 2-on-1 that Pat says, I think it's a no-brainer to hand pass it in for the volleyball effort. If it's a 1-on-1, he basically said that it's a momentum sucker when they're blocked, and he'd be happier to take the score and get it on the board rather than it's blocked and it goes down the other end of the field and potentially to concede 2. Now he gave a bit of a different answer the other night, and he got quite tetchy about it, but the question was asked in about 5 different ways almost, and I think it was natural enough for him to get angry. But what do you? I think he wants the point on the board. I think.
I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, obviously, and it's not. It's obviously discussed and it's coached and it's a plan, because they've done the same against Monaghan. They must have ran through again 6 or 7 points against Monaghan, and they could have at least. There's a couple of times they fisted overnight, and there was at least 1 or 2 of them were goal because they were wide open. So the issue I would have with it is it's unsightly. Like, even the boys beside me were sort of saying, for God's sake, they should ban the fisted points. They're not. It's not an enjoyable score to watch.
No. Is that time coming, Dick?
I would have thought it probably wasn't as prevalent that it has become, but maybe Armagh's a bit of an outlier on that. But I don't think it adds anything to the game. It never really did. It's sort of something that has evolved, and we're seeing more of it, where it was quite sort of unusual there. You might got 1 in a game, or some games but if we're going to see a lot of them, it's something that I don't think it adds to it. It's a very easy one to eradicate. No more than back in your day, Pat, when you could fist pass the ball into the goals. Maybe that's when Armagh should be playing with the old rules. They'd be cleaning out, but that was sort of deemed it passed the sell by date. But taking it away from it, by contrast, right? Again, where does those missed opportunities sort of add up over the course of the game? Galway took their chance. Matthew Tierney was through. Like, if that was an Armagh jersey, he was fisting that ball over the bar. Whereas, you know what? He took a shot and he slid it under the keeper. So in a game where Armagh should have been winning that game by 3 or 4 points comfortably in terms of their dominance, the scoring chances, they ended up losing it. And it'd be interesting if they take a wee bit of a sit back and just sort of look at that as an example, as is, because you're not going to be able to run as many chances through and you get to Croke Park, quarter-final, semi-final, fine. There's going to be less chances, and when there's a goal on, you really should be going for it if the margins are there. And again, it's like a decision-making process for a player. If you're in a decision, but if you're not even looking for it, if you're sort of indoctrinated to go the minute you're through the 21, those chances just evaporate. because
But
they're not
you're-
even given the opportunity. Whereas you said, you used the example, like how many over that tenure of Dublin, how many goals did we see of Dean Rock sitting on the edge of the box, and like they were deflating, but they took the goal. It wasn't a fisted point, you know, sitting on the edge of the box, palming it in. Like I'd say Armagh, between the Monaghan game and the Galway game, at least 2 or 3 goals they've left behind by taking that option.
Yeah,
But that's for them to
agree with-
decide and have a look at it. But as a spectacle, it's not nice to watch.
I agree with Dick. As a spectacle, it's not nice. As a skill, there's no skill involved at all. Secondly, I see the argument of oh yeah, if the shot is blocked down, right, it gives momentum to the opposition. But the key to great players and great champions is they speculate. You got to speculate. You got to gamble. You can't take the easy option. The great player will gamble. Now I looked at the clips of the game last night. I looked at the game again last night. I looked at 6 clips, and Keane McConville punched a pint. He punched a pint, and at the time, Conor Turpin was running unopposed in the centre. Should have been popped off. I gave the example of Jason Duffy when he should have popped it off. That was 2 goals out of 6. The other passes, it was a case of coaching, because I was talking to one of the Kenmare coaches last night, and he said Donny Buckley coaches Kenmare. And Donny is a top-class Gaelic football coach. And Donny is advised to a fella coming in from the side, and there's guys descending on you, pop it to the far post, because he said there's always a player at the far post. That's where defences are vulnerable. And I remember I think they scored 6 or 7 points last week, but there was one that they punched wide, and it was Tiernan Kelly, and he was coming in at a very bad angle. And really, somebody should have peeled off, and he should have been laid off them. But so the decision-making by the Armagh forwards, I would say, is suspect. And yes, like, they are the highest scorers in the country after 2 matches. But you look at 2 stats from their 2 games, and like, some of their forward play has been very impressive. They've only scored 1 goal in 2 games, right? 1 goal in 2 games. And what's worrying about them? And we talk about the modern game, and we talk about Kerry last year, and one of the keys to Kerry's success last year is scoring goals. But the big key under the modern game is the 2-pointers. In the 2 games that Armagh have played so far, they have scored how many 2-pointers in 2 matches?
Well, they'd none the first day.
None the first day, and 1 the last day from Oisin O'Neill from a free. 1.
Yeah,
Like,
and again, two games in, we don't have maybe long enough to fully adjudicate on it. But most teams, when we've done it before with other teams that aren't scoring goals, the root cause is they're not creating chances, right? They're creating chances.
Yes.
The problem is they're fisting the bloody thing over the bar. So it's a decision internally to, because the argument that it gives a team momentum if they block it down. Well, the argument is there's a counter argument to that as well. Like, if you're a team and you're in the ascendancy, if you bury a goal past a team, it knocks them back. You talk about season momentum and command, even against the Monaghan game, when Monaghan were way out of it. But there was a sense in the first half that those times Armagh were getting through, when they fisted over the bars, we got away with that one. Do you know what I mean? It actually sort of said we should have, by all accounts, conceded a few goals here, and it's because we're still in the game here because they're not been ruthless. So there is a counter to that. The opposite is valid as well. So listen, this is something that they'll say, because they're going to create the way that they're playing, the hard runners. You look at Oisin Connaughton, they're going to keep creating these chances because of the quality and the pace and the athleticism of their players to get in behind and break tackles. It's going to be up to them to decide what to do with them. And on the basis of the first 2 games, they're going to ratchet up big scores. But I say you can't be relying on 6 or 7 of these chances when it comes to Croke Park to separate the men from the boys. You're going to get maybe 2 of them. What do you do with them?
Yeah,
you know,
you'd wonder, are they getting their arses chawed if there's a goal chance and it's blocked? maybe
potentially.
maybe. We just moved to Donegal. Kerry is obviously a repeat of last year's All-Ireland final. It was a different type of a game. First thing, lads, Dick, you've obviously played in Ballyshannon, have you? What a deadly venue. Like, even just people on top everywhere. I was up there last year for the first time for Donegal Derry, and I loved it. And even walking up the hill to get to, and these mad steps to get to the ground and that. It's a deadly venue.
We played Donegal in a league game. I think it was 2002 or 3. Brennan Devaney was sort of old school. We were sort of starting out. I'll never forget coming off the pitch. We were winning well, and then they came back and scored a couple of late goals. Got a bit feisty, but as you said, the atmosphere, like, they were literally right up on top of you. And a few boys got sent off. It was all a bit touchy. We lost by a point, but we were beaten. And like, thought the Donegal supporters would be sort of, well, anything like the abuse that we got coming off the pitch, because they're literally on top of you walking into the dressing room. And I said, I've never enjoyed going to Ballyshannon, and it's not an enjoyable place for opposing teams. But from a Donegal perspective, yeah, they're going out on the pitch with at least a 2 or 3 point advantage, because it's so tight. It's like an intermediate or junior club venue compared to the big inter-county stadium. So yeah, it was probably a bit tactical on Donegal's point to bring them to bring Kerry there, and it certainly didn't do them any harm on the day.
Pat, you briefly kind of alluded to it there, and I don't like to use the word allude because it's a real Sunday game kind of term, but
yeah, I used to use that in Sunday game.
Yeah, as such was.
I never used it in my life otherwise. Did
you see Cyril Farrell's Laker Gale, lads? Jeez, it was magic to look at it. Look back at it. As such was his great one. He used to always say it, but there's different things that people say on these shows. But Pat, what have you seen different from Donegal? Obviously, you mentioned about the zonal marking last year, maybe pushing out, maybe going more man to man. Did we learn much about if these two teams clashed later on in the year? You probably didn't learn that much in the sense that the best footballer in the country wasn't on the pitch, so it's a different. All bets are off. But
let's be honest now. This result is absolutely irrelevant. It will mean absolutely nothing in a couple of months' time. Right. Well, let's take Donegal. Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. Yes, they're pressing up, they're man marking. But this is a Donegal team that were pretty much at full strength last week, are flying fit, have been training for months, are so right. I wouldn't. Now, the stat, and they had a very impressive stat as well, 4 turnovers in the entire game. But you'd say, oh, that's brilliant. Geez, never talked about it. But the bottom line is, this was a Kerry team, particularly in the first half, that brought absolutely no intensity. Now, it was a cunning plot, because I thought for a while that Jack just brought Seanie O'Shea to play Donegal on his own, because it looked like that, scoring 11 points. What a cunning plot. He, and you talk about cute Kerrymen, but like the dogs in the street knew last week, by the way, lads, everywhere I went, David Clifford isn't going to Donegal next weekend. and everyone knew he wasn't going to allow Jimmy have another look at David in action. He wasn't going to allow Jim have a chance of saying, I wonder what defensive tactic could we come up to counteract. David was never going to Donegal, full stop. The team that Kerry played last week was about as close to that B team as you could find. 5 of the All-Ireland starters. They were terrible in the first half. I mean, Christ almighty. Finbar Rorty and Peadar Mogan ambled up the field to score 4 points in the first half against the wind. Darragh O'Beal got a goal. And I can tell you this, between now and the end of the year, no player will be in more space in front of a goal for scoring a goal than Darragh.
A kick pass into him, by the way, Pat, as well. A kick pass, which you don't see every day of the week.
It was so, he was standing there so long unopposed that young Malone had the ball, and they were pointing to Malone where Darragh O'Beal was, and he kept going and kept going, and young Malone passed it to, I think, to Shane O'Donnell, and Shane O'Donnell eventually kicked it. So yeah, they're learning. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, man marking, high press. They're kicking the ball more in transition. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Jim is no fool. But as regards whether the result will have anything to do with relevance next July, absolutely zero.
Well, then, do you know what? In that case, we're not going to spend too much time talking about it.
No, it was, as you said, it was Kerry Q tourism at its best. Yeah. As you said, it was a thumb of your nose towards all of the stuff that Pat said. Is you're not getting David. I'm not bringing up to you. That's it. You're not getting his autographs. You're not getting the marking. You're not going to get to take kick lumps of them. We're going to go up. They probably didn't even stay in Donegal. They went up, played the game. If they got paid by 20 points, it didn't matter. Down the road again.
They stayed in Sligo after.
There you go. They give Sligo the money instead.
Boys, we'll move to Mayo Dublin, and before we get into the game, Dick, I know you're an avid retro jersey man. Oh, I love that Mayo retro jersey, and even the way the numbers was on the back of it is an absolute peach.
They could be at it, and after that performance and the significance of it, we might see it again. So because it goes back to their last All-Ireland winning team. So there's a lot of, when you're any day you're beating Dublin comfortably, even though we know we'll talk about Dublin where they're at in the minute, is a good day for Mayo football. And again, carrying on from the Galway game, a team playing with confidence, a team playing, like they're enjoying their football, they're enjoying being part of a group of players there, and a bit of feel-good factor back around Mayo. Again, it's early days yet, but again, considering the amount of scars that Mayo football have from Dublin over the years, that's a good marker to lay down. I know it mightn't have that much significance. Dublin are in a bit of transition, and we'll talk maybe about Ger Brennan in a minute. His comments were refreshingly honest, but it points to maybe a worrying sort of summer for Dublin if they can't sort of reverse the trend at the minute. But as I say, Mayo are just playing like it's quite strange. You talk about the overcoaching and the tactics of other teams. We mentioned Donegal and Armagh, whereas you look at Mayo, just old school, head down, hoof it into the middle of the square and see what happens, and they're getting a return of it. So that's a team I want to watch. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a team because it sort of gets you on the edge of your seat, and it's obviously a tactic that they're going to use more of. And they didn't have Aidan O'Shea on the edge of the square as prominent, so they're probably looking to see him as possibly a target man. And if you're going to, because I think that's where Mayo never really figured him out over the last 10 years and sort of have a target man on the edge of the square that they can just let ball in, that if nothing else he mightn't score it, but he'll win it for somebody else. So again, it's really interesting to watch the way Mayo's evolving, and as I say, they're trending in a good direction. Now, they don't want to get too far ahead, but that's you know, that's a difficult thing when it comes to Mayo, because they're already looking at Croke Park again in July, and been a top 4 team again, and see where it goes from them. So again, job done, and you know, Dublin were unfortunate too. Like, the sending off for Sean McMahon was harsh when you look at it back in slow motion, and they were sort of still in the game, and that sort of got away from them. But yeah, they'd be worried in Dublin now. That's a few flat performances, and they've been even though maybe the sending off was a bit unfair, they still were second best for a lot of part of that game. So yeah, I'd say Ger Brennan and Dublin now are just sort of scratching their heads where are they at the minute. Unfortunately, Mullen have to get them in the next game, so we might get a sort of a bounce back from that. But yeah, again, kudos to Mayo.
We'll come to Dublin in a second, Pat. Just a bit of madness with Mayo. Like, you look at those teams in 15, 16, 17, there was always a bit of madness, probably a bit of chaos. Dick mentioned there about them going long a lot. I don't expect, when push comes to shove, that they're going to be going long the whole time, but if teams think you're going long, then all of a sudden they're sitting back, and then there's maybe more chance of 2-pointers. I think they'll marry the two of them together. But there's definitely a lot of expression from a Mayo point of view. It looks like they're allowed to express themselves a bit more. It looks like they're enjoying it a bit more as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But look, what you're looking at is a bounce you get from a new manager, and there's no doubt about it.
Not every new manager, though.
Yeah, but the one thing about Andy Morton is, he's a very infectious character. He's very much into this attacking football. They're kicking the ball, they're moving the ball fast. They've Ryan O'Donoghue out at centre forward, who I think has been a revelation so far. Maybe it looks like his best position. That young lad in the corner, young Brennan, looks a promising prospect. They have all the old guard back. Look, this is we've said it 100 times. This is a team going for one last hurrah, because a lot of these boys will not be playing senior football in 2027 for Mayo. I think they can win a league, there's no doubt about it. Can they win a championship? I don't think so. It's early days yet to judge them. I think they'll be looking for a Connacht title and getting to an All-Ireland semi-final. Is there an All-Ireland in them? I'm not too sure at this stage. But yeah, as Dick alluded to, the sending off, the game was a bit in the balance until the sending off. And the sending off looked very harsh. And under the new rules, remember, when it's 15 versus 14 and you have to keep one up, there's an extra man, there's probably 2 extra men if you want to use the goalie. And there's a huge advantage to the team with the extra man. But let's not overrate the omelette. I mean, Dublin team are in transition. The quality of the football on display, it wasn't a great football match. So Mayo played well at times, deserving winners, but not in terms of quality. The quality we saw in Armagh, Galway, even the quality we saw at times in Kerry, Donegal, that wasn't there in Castlebar.
Yeah, I'll just go through Ger Brennan's comments. There's quite a bit of meat on this.
There's a lot in it, wasn't there?
Yeah, so just bear with me for a second. I pulled out what I would view as the most important parts. He just said, the league for us, it's about trying to unearth and blood up a couple of new players. We're obviously doing that strategically. We had a couple of new lads in this week making debuts, and a couple of guys last week making debuts, and we're just trying to see how they get on at this level, with the bigger picture in mind, which is obviously pushing hard for the Leinster Championship and the All-Ireland Championship later on the year. It's a league of exploration. There's a risk reward to it in terms of not having as many of our experienced guys in the field, but we know what those fellas can do. They've given a lot to Dublin, but we're probably at a turning point now where we had to start unearthing a couple of new guys and bring freshness to the whole group. And then he just goes on and says, well, I would suggest probably some of our fellas who've been around the block that there will be a few tough decisions to be made. All good lads. You make those decisions through looking at the data, looking at the contributions fellas are making on the pitch and off the pitch, and then your eyes don't lie. Pat, what would you read into that? And like, maybe it's a bit harsh or unfair to pull out names, but who do you think, what players do you think are in trouble? I'll put it to you that way.
But there's no doubt about it. From what I know, I've never met Joe Brennan, but they said he's very much a black and white, that he'll call something exactly as he sees it. There'll be no preferential treatment. And look, judging by his comments from last week, there's a lot of guys with a lot of All-Ireland medals in their back pockets who will not be part of the Dublin panel in a couple of weeks' time. Now, it's obviously, it asks, the basic question in Gaelic football is the last hurrah. And most sports people get the last hurrah wrong. They usually think, there's one more year in it, there's one more crack. Now, is there a last hurrah in a lot of Dublin players? I'm not too sure. Right, I've always used this analogy about professional sport vis-a-vis amateur sport. In professional sport, the more you win, the more you get paid. So you're hungry. There's a carrot there all the time. In amateur sport, the more you win, the more time you put into it, it's for another medal. And one of the things I was amazed at with Jim Gavin, that he could keep his team hungry to win 6 in a row. Now, there's this, people will often talk about, Jim achieved the 6 in a row, Kerry couldn't achieve the 5 in a row. And there's a little slight difference between the two teams. For our 5 in a row achievement, and I haven't the figures exactly, but for our 5 in a row against Offaly, if Jimmy Dean and myself had been fit, our starting 15 would have had 14 of the players starting in 7 for 5. For Dublin's 5 in a row appearance, I can't remember exactly the figures, but they were up to 20-something players. So they had a good panel of players. They had a conveyor belt of top. They had the stars, the leaders always in situ, but they had a conveyor belt of good players coming in, and he always got the mix right, he got the hunger right. But unfortunately, the conveyor belt is not there in Dublin anymore. The success rate at under 17 and under 20 is very, very poor. They haven't really had any star, any, you could say, blue chip player that has arrived on the scene in the last 2 years. And that has made a difference. I mean, Kerry brought guys last year. And if you told me this time last year that Mark O'Shea and Sean O'Brien and Evan Looney would be starring for Kerry to win an All-Ireland, I'd say you're off your rocker. But Jack brought these players into the training panel, he developed them, and they played a major role. I can't see these players at the moment with Dublin. I don't see any top quality players coming in, and I just see a team in transition, and Dublin supporters might need to be patient, because Jor has to do a chopping job. He has to bring fresh players in. And I just think that some of the old players at the moment, there's a lot of All-Ireland medals there, and I just don't think the hunger and appetite is there. And I'm not surprised at that.
Yeah, and we don't know what's going on in the training field as well. You don't know what hunger and enthusiasm and energy that lads are bringing to it. But it's going to be fascinating to see maybe what names are cast aside over the coming weeks. Lads, we're just going to take a quick break and we'll be back. Just to finish off the Division 1 action, Dick, disappointing result for your own county. Unfortunately, you're really on the back foot now. I remember being in the Hyde last year. I think you were 3 or 4 points winners when you played them last year in Division 2. But the wheel has turned, unfortunately, a bit. You ended up 6-point losers the other day.
Yeah, listen, competed a bit better than the previous week. Spoke last week about how disappointing the performance all around against Armagh was. So at least they competed better, gave away 2 very slack goals, just errors that you can't get away with or can't expect to get away with at Division 1, and that just sort of give Roscommon the sort of bounce that they held on to the lead. But Rory Beggan was back, added a bit of stability into it. We've got the Dubs now. Listen, on have a very good record against Dublin in Croke Park in the league.
Nick, when you were relegated, that was the only game you won there a couple of years ago.
Yeah, would have probably. I'd say we probably beaten Dublin more in Croke Park than most teams have, including Kerry over the years, surprisingly. So listen, I think they need more players back. They need the likes of Jack McCarn back. They need sort of Conor McCarthy back. They need Michael McCarville. Just these players make such a difference, because the guys that have been asked to step up, they're coming from not a low base, not to be unfair, but they're having to just experience the pace of the game. So listen, it's going to be a tough run. You can see it in the voice of Gabriel Bradigan. He knows what he's dealing with there. But listen, we'll keep going. You know, this team is a Division 2 team. There's no point in saying otherwise, and it's going to be, you know. But that's where some teams get. You know, we'll talk about Division 2 at the minute. There's nothing. There's no shame to be down there. The quality of the teams down there, very competitive. But listen, competed a wee bit better. Roscommon are a good solid team, very hard to beat in the Hyde. But it was a relegation playoff, because it's hard to see where Monaghan are going to get 5 points out of the rest of their games. Roscommon as well will still have to try and find another couple of wins to keep themselves up, because, you know, look at the teams that we've already mentioned. There's none of those teams, Kerry, Donegal, Armagh, Galway, Mayo, are going to be easy to get points off.
Yeah, I know it's very hard. Look, it's just after 2 games, but yeah, it looks like already that it's going to be hard to see Monaghan avoid relegation. I mean, you look at their, like last year, they were the highest scoring team in the entire 4 divisions. After 2 matches this round, they're the lowest scoring team in Division 1, and they've the worst defensive record in all 4 divisions. And we talk about this word transition again, and like Dublin, which is a big county with lots of resources, are struggling in transition. They're struggling to get promising players in. Monaghan is a much smaller county, with probably a better record in recent years at under 20 and under 17. But you can't replace warriors like the Hughes brothers and all. Like the great, what was it 2 weeks ago, Dick, you said, at the retirement function?
That's right. Seven players with an average of about 150 performances each. You know, I think I mentioned it last week. And again, it's not to dwell on it, but it's not irrelevant. There was, of the 19 players that played against Cavan in the first round this time last year, there's only 4 of them were available there. Like, that's, you know, Kerry couldn't cope with that transition and still be competitive, never mind Monaghan. So it is what it is. Just the cards have fallen for them unkindly. But bit by bit, there'll be more players coming back in. But as you say, it's too much, too soon, too quick.
Yeah, just from a Roscommon point of view, Pat, from Mark Dowd's point of view, like, they could have got something the first weekend. You know, there were good winners at the weekend. It is going to be difficult to pick up points, but they will have, you know, a Bridget's crew coming back at some stage throughout the league as well, or a handful of them anyway, at least. So there's a possibility of picking up more points, and they've kind of hit the ground running, which you have to in Division 1.
Well, look, I have to be honest, they surprised me in the opening round in Killarney, because I genuinely believed they were in for a hammering, particularly without the Bridges boys and a couple of Strokes Sound boys as well. But I liked what I saw in Killarney. I mean, there was at least 2 occasions where it looked like Kerry are going to steamroll them. Kerry got a 6 or 7 point gap, but you know what? They kept going. Like, they have two of the best forwards operating around Division 1 in Diarmuid Murtagh and Dara Craig. I think they scored, off the top of my head, was it 116 they scored, or 111 they scored against Kerry. It was... and last week again, Diarmuid Murtagh, as far as I know, is the highest scorer in Division 1. So they have great forward talent, throwing in the Smith. But sorry, I like what I see from Mark Dowd, you know. And like I said, they're still probably, themselves and Monaghan at the start of the league campaign, were going to be relegation favourites, and they possibly still might get relegated. But one would have to, as a Roscommon supporter, you'd have to be happy with last week's victory and the performance they gave down in Killarney, and probably it was the hooter that probably cost them the
hooter. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Roscommon, like, what teams, again, been in that situation for a number of years and are still playing. You'd look at the sequence of games, you'd be sort of picking games out to sort of say, knew you weren't going to win them all, and there were some tough trips. I'm looking at the fixtures ahead of me. They've got Dublin at home in round 5, right? They beat Dublin. That means Dublin then have to go and win 3 games to keep them up. Now, Dublin, you look at the other fixtures where Dublin are at, so they have a few tough fixtures ahead of them. So in terms of Roscommon, whatever but anything else, they'll be targeting that game. We can beat Dublin at home.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, they've shown more than enough in the first 2 games that they're going to be competitive, but certainly that they could be beating Dublin at home. So anyway, looking a wee bit far ahead, but Roscommon are in a good enough place, because the boys to come back in and they've got scores. Hey, in the new game, when you've got Dermot Moore to end the Smith, these boys, they can bang 2 pointers over as good as anybody. You're going to compete. Yeah,
just the last thing I should have mentioned, Dublin were obviously missing Con O'Callaghan as well, and lads, it's poles apart when he's not on the pitch. They're a different they are a different team when he's on the pitch, and
agreed.
And obviously they're a completely different team when he's not on the pitch. Not exactly sure what the scenario is there, but if they want to if they want to retain their Division 1 status, he's going to need to be on the pitch. And it's no coincidence that they put up a fairly paltry tally at the weekend and he wasn't playing. But Dick, you mentioned about Division 2. I was a big fan of what I saw from Meath the first weekend against Derry. Big result for them up in Breffni. I think it was the first win up in Breffni in 60-something years, I think. Yeah. Now I think the stats are a little bit askew. I don't think they had played there that many times. But Jack Flynn kicked a big booming 2-pointer again.
And Jack Flynn, catching the he's already been a folk hero with me. Yeah,
Jordan Morris, brilliant again. He was brilliant during the week. I don't know, boys, did you see that 2-pointer he kicked for Maynooth during the week? It was an absolute peach off the outside of the left. Meath have put themselves in a good spot, Dick, early.
A good start. As I say, I'm feeling sorry for me neighbours. Like, they could easily be top of the group, and here they are in the relegation battle already, because they threw away the game against Cork down in Cork, and they threw away against the lead against Meath. Cracking game. It was a dinger of a game. Like Breffni Park, we were talking about other stadiums in terms of the atmosphere. Breffni Park, when you get two teams that go at it, it's as good a stadium as you get. I always love playing in it. Listen, Meath are in a good place. As we've already said, like, they needed to have a bounce back. They weren't just a sort of a one hit wonder, and that they're not just sort of stepping on, that they're adding players. And Jack Flynn, like, you know, big. If there was ever an archetypal Meath player, it's him. Big, agricultural, strong, and complete indifference to everything around them. He just got the ball, and I'm just sticking this over the bar. Whereas of many players would we see, especially a young player that's sort of fighting his way, he might have been conservative, he might have tried to give it to somebody else. He says, no, I'm backing myself. And he, as you said, like the week before, Mike, he stuck it into the clouds. So great game. Again, Cavan, you know, they're not a whole pile loss and defeat either. They're competitive. But again, look at the league itself. Like, it's brilliant. Like, the Derry Tyrone game on the Saturday night was an absolute belter as well in terms of pace and intensity. So listen, there's that division's going to go to the wire of the last two rounds in terms of who's either getting promoted or going down, and every point is so vital. So handing over points cheaply, as Cavan have done in the last round, it could prove costly. Whereas Meath on the other side, you know, their ship is sailing in a good direction, and Robbie, no better man than Robbie Brennan to sort of latch onto that.
It's no coincidence, Pat, that Meath are going strong as well. Like, they're going with a lot of the personnel that got them to the semi-final last year and went on that run. I think for the bigger picture, Robbie Brennan would see the massive benefits of being in Division 1, getting to Division 1. Like, even like we were speaking to him, he just did a press briefing maybe 10 days out from the league, and you know, ask him what progress would be in 2026, and he was just saying progress is silverware of some description, or getting up to Division 1, and it looks like they're going fairly hard after that. Like, most of the faces that we saw last year that helped beat Kerry, that helped beat Dublin, that helped beat Galway, they're all been given their game time now, and they're looking like they're going hard for Division 1.
Yeah, and spare a thought for Cavan and Dermot McCabe. What was the stat that I see in his last 9 league and championship? He's had 5 1-point defeats alone. Now, Cavan were very unlucky. It was a damn good game of football now, and Jack Flynn's buzzer-beating shot, 2-pointer, was absolutely brilliant. Division 2 is going to be, because Cork are very impressive. They're top of the table. You know, they swatted Louth aside in Drogheda last week. Kildare, I saw Kildare playing awfully, and like Kildare, they're on song. They're playing lovely football. And we talked about coaches being brought back in, and there's no doubt about it. Shrewd Bucko to bring in Davy Burke, for Brian Flanagan to bring Davy Burke in as coach in Kildare.
Can I just talk to you about that one, Pat? Right? I think that was a big move. I think it was a big move for a lot of reasons. I know Davy well enough just from media dealings. Like, Davy would see himself as Kildare manager, and I think that's his ultimate ambition, is to manage Kildare. That's a potentially divisive move, bringing a big personality like that into the backroom team. But Brian Flanagan is clearly, I don't know if selfless is the right word, but he clearly will do anything to see Kildare progress. Because,
it's not a selfish thing. It's a sign of a great manager, that you look around and you see, well, who are the great footballing brains that are available to me in this county? Passionate county man, passionate Kildare man, a guy who has an impressive track record at underage. And Davy Burke was a perfect fit. It's no different than, like I said, Jack O'Connor bringing in Kieran Donaghy this year in Kerry. The great managers utilise the best of expertise that's around. And you're right, Sally, getting back to Derry Tyrone. I watched Derry Tyrone, and you know, For years, I was their nemesis, particularly with Tyrone and the Naughties, and you'd be complaining about blanket defences and boring football possession, keeping to the process. And last week game was like a blast from the past. It was full of innocence, full a shootout at the OK Corral. Just a lovely, enjoyable game of football. And our Derry series, it's nice to see Derry getting a victory. I'm not too sure whether I was looking at the two teams, and we talk about the series contenders for the All Ireland, and obviously Donegal and Armagh are up there with Kerry and whoever else. I looked at Derry and Tyrone, and particularly Tyrone last week, and I was saying to myself, are these serious contenders for the All Ireland? Derry, not too sure. Tyrone, I know they got to an All-Ireland semi-final last year, but I just looking at Tyrone and I see a team that, and we talked about it 2 weeks ago, I talked about their small forwards, their lack of physique, their lack of a target man. I just felt that lack of, one of the things about the prototype for the modern game, you're looking at these 6'2", 6'3" athletes, big, strong athletes, the likes of the Jack Flynn's and Meats and these boys who are dominating that middle third, the Joe O'Connors, Kerry had Liam Smith came on last week, and I see a lot of little light fellas, and I just saw Tyrone last week, and I looked at their stats, and in the second half, they got 3 scores in the second half. Their last 5 shots at goal, they didn't score. They didn't score in the last 20 minutes. And I just looked at the team and I'm sort of seeing, am I seeing an improvement in year 2 under Malchior? I just don't see a pattern to that play. I don't see an improvement. I'm not too sure. They're a team that are slipping a little bit.
And they're going to win.
It's not that they've slipped. They haven't figured out their best team. They haven't figured out yet how do we get the Canavans, Michael Home, these guys sort of, because they're. One of the things now I've noticed, it's a couple of times now I've noticed, and even going back to the semi-final last year against Kerry, like Derek Canavan, for all his brilliance, like he's a small man, and there's no point in saying otherwise. And sometimes in big games, when it gets tight and claustrophobic, he can get sort of bullied out of it, and that happened against the semi. And you could see there was times against Derry he just got sort of coughed up. And when you have a lot of men like that, as opposed to throwing somebody on the edge of the square that can win their own ball, like Matty Donnelly can only go on for so long, so they are missing a few big men up front to try and add something a wee bit different. And so I'd say that's what Malachy, like, that there's talent there as good as the team, certainly as good as the teams that are playing in Division 2 and above that, but we just haven't seen evidence that they've figured out how to get them on the pitch at the same time and get the best out of them. But listen, he's men coming in, and he's got a good big strong ball winning midfield, but it's getting that supply quick enough and trying to get the best out of them. But I see, Pat, your point about a Derry or Tyrone. You see, the way the game's gone now, and even more so than it used to be, like, there's a pathway to an All-Ireland final for so many teams now, because there's only really Kerry at this stage in Donegal that are really out in front, but whereas everybody else, and Armagh, but what I would say it is, Derry or Tyrone would fancy their chances beating an Armagh, and Armagh would fancy their chances beating a Donegal or a Kerry. So that's how, if you go back to how Tyrone won their All-Ireland a couple of years ago, they weren't the best team in the country. Mayo beat the best team in the country for them, and then they just had to beat Mayo. So there's a legitimate pathway for an awful lot of teams there if they can get the right players fit and on the pitch come June and July, that some team can take a big team out, because Kerry, for all their benefits, they still need David Clifford. They're still dependent, and no more so some of the big teams. So I think we talked about Derry here last week, Mike. They needed to bounce back. They were flat against Meath. They didn't get a turn out of their midfield, but you seen again on Saturday night when Brenton Rodgers and Conor Glass are on their game, they're as good a midfield pair as it has been over the last 5 years. And again, but the two of them, you look at Brenton Rodgers, that dip of the shoulder, that turn of pace, like that's as good as you're going to get at a midfield pair. And so when they're on their game, Derry are as competitive as there is out there.
Boy, just on Division 2, so Tyrone are on 1 point after 2 games. They're going to need to win their next 5 games. They're probably going to need to get to 11, 10 possibly, but unless if they throw another draw and 4 wins in there. Derry are after bouncing back really, really well. Meath are in good form, have maximum points. Cork have maximum points as well. Offaly are in trouble down the other end. There's no point in saying any different, and it looks like there's a small bit of a gulf there. Cavan are playing well, but they're in trouble by virtue of losing their games, albeit by narrow margins.
And the next game in that round is Cavan and Tyrone, and that's a relegation 4-pointer already in round 3.
Yeah. Just quickly, actually, lads, on And even from your obviously more recent, Pat played league back when it was kind of winter time and stuff like that, Dick. What's the break like when you have 2 games gone, you're getting 2 weeks then, and obviously there's a flurry of games coming again? How would you have dealt with the break? Would it have been an in-house game on the Sunday? The weekend
You'd be ready
between,
for
or?
it. I played the old. When I started, there was still league before Christmas, and I'm not old at this stage. That you played in October and the break was very drawn out. Yeah, you were ready for it because again, you'd done a lot of training into December and January. McKenna Cup, like you think of Donegal, so they had played 4 McKenna Cup games. Then they've hit 2 weekends, so they have 6 games played. They'd be ready for a break. So I'd say for a lot of teams, it's a bit of R&R. Just let the bodies repair.
Off the carton house, get a massage.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's no heading away for a night on the beer or anything like that. But it is sort of take a bit of a breather. Some teams will probably have a bit of work to do. They might try and use that opportunity, get a challenge game, especially if you have a team like a Dublin, for instance. There's a good chance Dublin might go and play either a big in-house game or a game somewhere to try and give them something else going into the next game. So depending on where you're at, teams will use it a wee bit differently. But across the board, it is a welcome break because it's been a frantic start to the year for a lot of teams. And as I say, you don't get too many breaks. As you say, you come back when it comes to championship. So at this time of year, it's very welcome.
Pat, I just throw a quick one. Dick mentioned about playing in Breffni, and it was somewhere he always liked playing. From the 2E, give me a venue you hated playing in. I'll throw it at you first, Pat.
I would say, you talk about league games, we played a lot of league games. Was it 3 matches before Christmas or 4 matches before Christmas? And in many cases, it was just part of the celebration for the All-Ireland. You went up, you had a few pints the night before, and you played a league game. And so we had some awful performances because we weren't capable of producing a performance because we weren't physically or mentally ready for it. I hated league games. I loved Croke Park, full house, All-Ireland final day. That was the day, I swear to God, from the start of the year, that was where I wanted to perform, on All-Ireland final day in Croke Park. And so be it if I didn't perform in a wet, muddy pitch in Ballybuffet or Markovich Park or wherever like that.
Was it just getting through the Pat? It was just getting through the games?
It was all about, at the end of the day, for me and for Kerry supporters, was about winning in All-Ireland and delivering on the fine. It's a bit like a singer. You want to perform on Broadway, or an actor performing on Broadway. You don't want your best performances in the parish hall doing the variety show. So, no, I've no memories of any pictures because Croke Park was where you came alive. Big day, big atmosphere, colour. Yeah.
Dick, I have a feeling. I have a feeling, Dick, you will actually answer the question.
I will, yeah. So very easily, it's an easy answer. Hyde Park in Roscommon. I said I had 2 of the most forgettable and humbling days out. One when I was starting my career, and one was the first day out. I think it was 17 or 18. I was only a young fella, went down, and I'll never forget. Back then, wasn't too many following Monaghan. There could have been 1,000 or 2 at the game. It was horrible, so it was. And I was marking. Remember big Francie Graham?
Oh yeah, all-star centre back in
absolutely,
the day,
yeah. As for me, the Egypt said I'd try and sort of size up to Francie, and I hit him a bit of a dunt. But Francie just turned and he just buried me in the solar plexus, and I just dropped to my knees for about 2 minutes. And I says, right, that's the end of me and the Hyde. And then on the other side, of the career, we went down, and I was on the bench, and I wasn't only coming back to train and wasn't fully fit, but there's always a gale. It's always freezing in the Hyde anytime I've been there, and there's always a gale blowing down to the scoreboard goals, and we were playing with the wind in the first half. And as a sub, Pat, you wouldn't have known this too often when you weren't a sub. You're always sort of saying, right, well, that's hopefully, I used to say to the boys, if I was so right, try play against the breeze in the first half. So you come on in the second half with the breeze at your back. But anyway, we were playing against the breeze.
Sorry, keep going, yeah.
Well, yeah, we were playing with the breeze, and the boys were playing awful. We were making an absolute fist of it, and they only went in a point or 2. And I said to Jinxie or Stephen Golightly on the bench, I said, we're buggered here, Stephen. He says, what do you mean? I says, we're going to have to come on here now. There's a bloody gale force wind against us. We're frozen. We can't feel our feet, and we're going to be expected to turn this around. And that's exactly what happened. Come on with 20 minutes to go, and Roscommon hit a few cow kill the hair kicks, as my father used to say, and we couldn't get the ball up the pitch. I was frozen, played nothing, and I said, here, if I never see this bloody place again, it'll be too soon.
It started and finished your career.
Absolutely. So they can have it.
Here's a quiz question. I played a day where there was 2 All-Ireland finals played in the Hyde, and Kerry were playing Roscommon in both All-Ireland finals. One was the All-Ireland under-21 final,
yes,
which was played in Hyde Park. And the curtain raiser was that competition which they had for a couple of years. I think it was the Count final. It was another competition that they had for it. And we stayed the Saturday night in Roscommon. And I'll never forget it. It was a piss up the whole night because the seniors were on the... we got beaten. The under-21s got beaten. But I do remember one thing about Hyde, and it's gas. The atmosphere was dodgy that day. There wasn't a great atmosphere. But I can still recollect, and it's one of the few recollections I have of provincial grounds, there was a long walk from the dressing room to the pitch where you went through the crowd. Holy God, lads, that was scary. That was scary.
Lucky what you were.
Great people in Roscommon, by the way.
Yeah, just quickly, lads, we just fly down through the divisions.
Because I'm always slagging. The last week now, I'm slagging off Alliance League Sunday, right? And Alliance League Sunday, the first week was 2 hours and 4 minutes, and last week was 2 hours and 3 minutes. And the total contribution to Division 3 and Division 4 football games on Alliance League Sunday was 1 minute. 1 minute. Where they gave the results. And I was slagging off. I said, look, you either do a programme properly, have a hurling programme, have a football programme properly, but treat the Division 3 and Division 4 games. Give them a bit of respect. And
Pat, you have a horse in the race down there.
Sorry,
for a lot of my career when I was playing, you were down there. I'd be tuning in and you'd be talking about
as the only person here on the podcast who was at a Division 3 game last Sunday and feel knowledgeable about it. Division 3 actually, and we leave Dick to Division 4. Division 3 is going to be a really competitive because you have the 2 favourites, Down and Westmeath, but they haven't been firing in all cylinders, but they're still unbeaten. Wexford are a surprise.
Yeah, I thought they'd struggle now, yeah.
They are at the top of the table, unbeaten. But the one crowd you'll see, unlucky, who would have been considered as favourites for promotion, are Clare. And Clare are a serious football team. And they played Down and Westmeath in the first 2 matches and were very unlucky to be beaten in both of their matches. So it's a dogfight down there. Sligo and Fermanagh, 2,500 to 3,000 people in Markovich last week. Newly laid surface, great atmosphere, great crowd. Sligo got blown out at kickouts, got destroyed in fielding in the midfield, and most unusually still won it because probably Fermanagh's shooting efficiency wasn't poor. But it's Division 3 is a good league. Good league.
The worm has turned. Pat Spillane is an advocate for the lesser lights. Thankfully, after 50 years commenting.
In 2 years'
where were you when I needed you?
In 2 years' time, you could be talking about Monaghan Division 3, so maybe you'd have to get familiar with it.
I might actually meet you at the game when it's Monaghan v Sligo.
There's a lot of low blows been thrown out today, lads. Just quickly, Oisin McConville had some interesting comments about what he deems as the quality of refereeing, or the calibre of referees that are sent down to Division 3 and Division 4, and he feels that they should be getting a better shake of it, and that some of the better referees in the country should be refereeing these games. I think the line was, there were rules there tonight, this was in their defeat against Carlow, there were rules there tonight that I didn't even know existed and cost us dearly. So that was another thing. Just in Division 4 as well, London had a right good win over Longford at the weekend, and Carlow beating Wicklow is a big one, because Wicklow scraped a win the first weekend and would have been seen as promotion favourites, and that Carlow-Wicklow game, that could come back to hurt Wicklow at the end. Now, they could be the top 2 in the wind-up. Antrim beaten again for the second week in a row, which would have been a surprise too. But
they were down to 13 men.
Yeah, but still, that's the stats don't show that, Pat, in the tally at the end. It just shows 0 points. I just say something? Last point, Pat, because we have to wrap up.
Yeah, but as regards Oisin, and now I remember Oisin was involved with Wicklow when they played Sligo. Was it last year? And he had a non-stop barrage of criticism towards the linesman and the referee the same day. Anyway, he picked up a suspension as a result of it. And Wicklow would have been disappointed to lose last week. Are the referees in Division 4 and Division 3 worse than Division 2 and Division 1? Absolutely not. I'd say good old Oisin, that's a nice deflective fucking tactic to take away from the fact that they lost the game that they possibly were expected to win. Nah, that's a load of cobblers that the referees are rubbish in Division 4 and they're way better in Division 1. Rubbish.
There's another grand little pop. There's plenty of pops taken there today. And on that note, folks, until the next pop next week.
He needs flashing lights. Can he have flashing lights around the side? That's what he's missing. Yeah.
Dick and Pat, thanks a million. As entertaining as always. We'll chat again next week.